A watch I've owned in my collection for a very long time is the Rolex Submariner, what a lot of people consider the best dive watch out there. But sometimes you come across an affordable watch by an iconic brand, Seiko. And to be honest, sometimes they never cease to amaze me. They'll come out with a watch that makes me question whether or not my Rolex was worth it. And that watch is this. Now, to give you guys a little bit of context as to why this watch is in my possession, I did want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Exquisite Timepieces. If you guys are interested in any Seiko, Grand Seiko, Mega Blow, Pub, Breguet, and many more, make sure you check out exquisitetimepieces.com. They're an authorized dealer for all these brands. Now, the reason why I'm talking about the sponsor in the beginning of the video is because that is actually how I got this watch in, and I had no intention of even experiencing this watch. Usually when I review watches, I ask Exquisite Timepieces or whoever I'm working with specific watches that I want to experience or that you guys suggest. This time, I wanted to have a little bit of fun with it. So instead of doing that, I asked Exquisite, hey, can you send me a batch of watches that I have no idea what they are, I just want to experience watches, have you guys choose it. Now, I do trust Exquisite Timepieces with their choices, so I was excited to see what came in. I got a Breguet, got a Moser, got a Grand Seiko, but despite all of those watches being incredible, the watch that really stood out to me was a Seiko, and it was the Marine Master 200 with the green dial, a watch that honestly I didn't even know they released. So as I mentioned in the beginning of my video, there's a lot of affordable dive watches that tend to make me question sometimes whether or not my Rolex Submariner is worth it. Obviously, a lot of people buy Rolex for either the quality of their pieces or they just really want the name, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in this case, when I first unwrapped this watch, the immediate reaction I had was, maybe this could be my one and only dive watch. The way I personally collect is I'm very minimal with my collection. So every watch I have to heavily consider their place in my collection. I won't have 2 dive watches, I won't have 2 chronographs. I tend to have 1 complication per watch, 1 brand per watch, and I'm very specific the way I collect. But when I got this watch and I unwrapped it, the first thought was, maybe I should save a little bit of money, put that money towards another piece, and actually add this Seiko as my main dive watch. That's how good it is. That's how good of an impression this watch gave me. Allow me to start off with the things that really impressed me when I first got this watch in. The first thing I noticed compared to other Seiko divers is the finishing. Now, I've experienced a lot of Seiko divers that had adequate finishing, but this watch has exceptional finishing. Brushing, polishing, edges, everything about the finishing here is superb for the price. You also get the ceramic bezel, which was a surprise to me, and finally that British green dial. Now, the British green dial is not as vibrant as pictures would suggest. When I looked online trying to see some research about this watch, a lot of photographers tend to show this green as a very vibrant green, but in reality, as I'm showing you here in the footage, it's very subtle. In dark lighting, you actually get a blackish dial, but then when the light hits it right, you will get that beautiful green dial. With that subtle texture, it's absolutely stunning in the metal. Taking a closer look at the hour hand and the minute hand, you get a beautifully thick and brushed finish on those hands. It is quite thick and big, but it's not overbearing. It works beautifully with this design. You also get a matte gold hand. The second hand, even though it is matte gold, that is already legible enough. But when you add that red tip over in the second hand, it makes it even better. Add a date window at 3 o'clock. Usually that would bother me, but not in this case. I would have hoped the date window would match the dial. And finally, at the 6 o'clock position, you get that X, that prospects, letting you know this is a professional Seiko diver. Now, for all the Seiko fans, you already know what I mean when I say the secret magic measurements. When it comes to Seiko dive watches, Seiko have the ability to use magic, somehow making their bigger watches wear a lot smaller. In this case, the Marine Master 200, they did reduce the size to 42 millimeters. But this watch wears like a 40 millimeters. If you count the bezel size rather than the case size, it is a 40.1 millimeter case. So when I put it on the wrist, it wears exactly like my Rolex Submariner. In fact, I feel like this wore a little bit smaller, and it just looks so good, especially with those beautiful angles. There's just something about this that makes it the perfect dive watch. Now allow me to give you the exact measurements of this watch. You get a 42.1 millimeter case, you get 48.8 millimeter lug to lug, which means top to bottom. Finally, a 12.5 millimeter thickness, which is perfectly acceptable for a dive watch. Putting it on my 6.5 inch wrist, you can see the watch does wear perfectly on my wrist. One of the most comfortable dive watches I've experienced from Seiko, and I absolutely love this watch. Personally, I'm heavily considering buying the blue dial with the stainless steel bezel variant. It's just such a good watch. One more controversial opinion, having the crown at the 4 o'clock position is absolutely perfect. I wish most dive watches had the crown at 4 o'clock. It doesn't dig into your wrist, and it's an absolutely genius design by Seiko. Now, one very important piece of information, this watch is in fact limited edition. As I mentioned, it's in stock over at Exquisite Timepieces, but if you somehow miss out on the limited edition variant, the green dial, which is actually my favorite, then you won't miss out on the regular production models, the blue dial, the regular black dial, and so on, which I'll have reviews for. But if you want this specific British green dial, it is limited edition. Now, to make this even better, you get the new 6R35 caliber. The previous generation had the 6R15. The difference is, well, 20 hours of power reserve. You get here 70 hours of power reserve. You get 21,600 VPH. You also get 24 joules, an absolute workhorse, and a very impressive in-house caliber by Seiko. So for about the $1,000 mark, you guys are probably wondering, why would you say this is the cheap alternative to Rolex? Well, I'm not necessarily looking at finding the cheapest alternative. I'm trying to find the best affordable alternative. Now, from Seiko, in my opinion, I've experienced all of their watches, including the Marine Master 300. But the reason why I don't put the Marine Master 300 is that is not necessarily affordable. It is a high-end Seiko. The Marine Master 200, from my personal experience, this specific variant is the best Seiko diver I've ever experienced, period. I don't care about the SKX, 5KX, all of those watches are great, but I'm looking for the best alternative, a watch from Seiko that I would be happy to own if I get rid of my Rolex. Quite frankly, this is a fantastic watch. The quality, especially the finishing on this piece, is superb. So here's my final verdict. If you're considering this watch as an alternative, in fact, if you're just considering a high quality dive watch, you can't go wrong with the new MM200. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, a very blunt statement, but I stand by it until they make something better. This Marine Master 200 is the best Seiko diver yet, period. I'm not counting the Marine Master 300, and I'm not counting their high-end spring drive calibers. For an affordable price point, the MM200 is the best diver you can get from Seiko. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Please add in the comment section below what other Seiko watches or any watches you want to see reviewed on the channel. And as always, I will see you in the next one. When considering your next luxury purchase, it's important to find someone you can trust, but also authorized dealers for the brands. Today's sponsor is ExquisiteTimepieces.com. Exquisite Timepieces have been in the business for the past 30 years, and they're authorized dealers for many brands such as Omega, Plopa, Breguet, Glasuta, and many more. They also carry high-end watches in the pre-owned section, so make sure you check out ExquisiteTimepieces.com or book a call with Exquisite Timepieces to consult about your next purchase.